The 100 Years' War was a conflict that raged between England and France for more than a century. Have you ever wondered how a dynastic dispute could spiral into chaos, influencing politics, faith, and even the daily lives of ordinary people? Let's go back to the 14th century, a time of turmoil and ambition. The origins of the war lay in the fragile relations between the English and French crowns. In 1328, the death of Charles IV of France without a male heir triggered a crisis. While French law excluded claims through the female line, Edward III of England, Charles IV's nephew, believed he had a legitimate claim to the French throne through his mother, Isabella. However, the French nobility favored Philip of Valois, a cousin of Charles, and crowned him Philip VI. This dispute set the stage for one of the longest and most devastating wars in history. But this was not just a story of kings and succession. The 100 Years' War was intertwined with the rise of national identities, the evolution of medieval warfare, and a profound struggle between earthly power and divine will. England and France, bound by feudal ties, suddenly found themselves as rivals in a larger, more ideological conflict. What did it mean to be French or English at this time? The violence of war profoundly reshaped these concepts. The early campaigns were marked by English dominance, largely due to innovative military tactics. The longbow, a formidable weapon of English archers, wreaked havoc on French cavalry at iconic battles, such as Crécy in 1346 and Poitiers in 1356. At Poitiers, the English captured the French King John II, sending shockwaves through Europe. These victories emboldened England, leading Edward III to proclaim himself the rightful King of France. But amid these triumphs lay the seeds of long-term suffering. As battles raged on the fields of France, another war simmered in the hearts of its people, a war of faith and meaning. The 14th century was also marked by the Black Death, a pandemic that decimated Europe's population. Amid the devastation, many saw the war as divine punishment, a test of faith in a fractured Christendom. Would the 100 Years' War have been avoided if leaders had heeded the moral teachings of their faith? What does this era teach us about the intertwining of religion and politics? The papacy played a significant role in shaping the narrative of the war. Popes, often seen as arbiters of peace, found themselves embroiled in the power struggles of kings. The Avignon papacy, during which popes resided in Avignon rather than Rome, heightened tensions. Critics labeled it the Babylonian captivity of the Church, questioning its independence from French influence. This period sowed distrust and fractured the unity of Christendom, a division that mirrored the discord between England and France. Joan of Arc, the Maid of Orleans, personifies the intersection of faith and war. A peasant girl who claimed divine visions, Joan inspired the French with her unshakable belief that God had chosen her to lead France to victory. In 1429, her leadership at the Siege of Orleans turned the tide of war, awakening hope in a nation teetering on despair. Her final martyrdom in 1431, burned at the stake by the English, left a legacy that transcended borders, questioning the morality of war itself. Amid political machinations and holy crusades, the war profoundly affected the relationship between the church and the people. Parishes were razed and tithes redirected to fund armies, leaving many to question their spiritual leaders. As kings and knights clashed on the battlefield, the 100 Years' War was also a time of social change. Feudalism, the backbone of medieval life, began to crumble under the weight of prolonged conflict. With lords often absent fighting distant battles, peasants gained an unexpected autonomy. However, this newfound independence was tempered by the destruction of war. Fields lay fallow, and entire villages disappeared from the map. What would it have been like to rebuild your life from scratch, knowing that peace might never come? The war also revolutionized military strategy and technology. The introduction of gunpowder weapons, such as cannon, signaled the decline of traditional castle fortifications. This shift heralded the end of chivalry as knights became increasingly obsolete on the battlefield. How did these changes influence the way people viewed war? Was it still an honorable pursuit, or merely a devastating means to an end? Economically, both nations faced ruin. France, fertile lands, once the breadbasket of Europe, were devastated by scorched earth tactics. England, meanwhile, overtaxed its coffers by financing overseas campaigns. The result was widespread poverty and heavy taxation. These hardships gave rise to rebellions such as the English Peasants' Revolt of 1381, in which commoners demanded justice. Could their calls for equality have sown the seeds of modern democracy? The 100 Years' War officially ended in 1453, with France regaining its territories and solidifying its sovereignty. Yet the scars of the war remain. England's dreams of continental dominance faded, and its ambitions turned to naval power and colonial expansion. France, emerging victorious, began the long process of unification under a centralized monarchy. The end of the war marked more than a shift in territorial lines. It signaled the dawn of a new Europe. The Renaissance flourished in its aftermath, as societies sought to rebuild and reimagine their futures. Reflecting on the resilience of those who lived through this era, one cannot help but admire their determination.